making a comment, or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows for members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please complete the request to speak form located on the meeting room counter. MAG staff can assist with any questions you may have. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the meeting room counter. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Our next item is call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda, informational items, or items on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for call to the audience unless the chair requests an exception to this limit. I have not received any requests to speak for the call to the audience. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website. Any comments received 2 hours prior to the meeting have been shared with the committee members in advance of the meeting for consideration and will be included in the formal meeting minutes. MAG staff, have we received any online written comments for the call to the audience?
Madam Chair, no written comments were received.
Thank you. Our next item is approval of the February 27, 2025 meeting minutes. Does any member of the committee have questions? Hearing none, prior to approval of the meeting minutes, there is an opportunity for members of the public to comment. I have not received any requests for this agenda item. MAG staff, have we received any online written comments for this item?
Madam Chair, no written comments were received.
Is there a motion to approve agenda item number 3?
This is Rob Bouchard's motion to approve.
Walter, thank you. I kind of talked to a couple people, so. And then a second?
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Robert Vandenacker, City of Buckeye.
And Robert Vandenacker,
Second.
thank you. We have a motion from Walter Bouchard and a second from Robert Vandenacker. A roll call vote will be taken at this time by Lisa Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Walter Bouchard.
Aye.
Thank you. Vince Wolpert.
Aye.
Thank you. Heather Kraus.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Mike Denby.
Aye.
Thank you. Tom Ekron.
Aye.
Thank you. Kim Anderson.
Abstain.
I'm sorry, Kim, will you repeat yourself?
Abstain.
Thank you. Robert Vandenacker.
Aye.
Thank you. John Woods. Mark Ortiz.
Aye.
Thank you. Andy Smith.
Aye.
Thank you. Megan Sheldon.
Aye.
Thank you. Monica Rabb.
Aye.
Thank you. Spencer Camps. Rick Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. Kim Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Nicole Clemens. Jenna Brickner.
Aye.
Thank you. Jennifer Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. Katrina Gerster.
Aye.
Thank you. Anu Jain.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair Simpson.
Aye.
Thank you. Ben Davis. Ryan Templeton.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Brody Lynn.
Aye.
Thank you. Jonathan Fudge.
Aye.
Thank you. Christina Hopez.
Aye.
Thank you. Aaron Daughtery. Mike Chamberlain.
Aye.
Thank you. Arden Holloway.
Aye.
Thank you. Gregory Arrington. Susie Stevens.
Aye.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Madam Chair, the motion passes with one abstention.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, which is the CMAC Annual Report. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Dean Giles, Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We're pleased to provide the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program Annual Report for the year ending September 30th, 2024. The Federal Highway Administration guidance requires that an annual report be completed that specifies the projects that obligated in the prior year, as well as the expected air quality benefits. The projects in this year's annual report were submitted to ADOT and the Federal Highway Administration, Arizona Division Office in February 2025, which is the due date for the annual report. And we submitted those using Federal Highway Administration's CMAQ project tracking system. A copy of the 2024 CMAQ annual report has been provided in your materials today. And for each of the 20 projects that are in the report, there's a description of the project, the cost information, the amount of CMAQ funds used for the project, and the estimated emission reductions in kilograms per day. MAG staff calculated the estimated emission reductions using data that had been provided in the project's application by the MAG member agencies. So this is kind of at the tail end of the projects with the CMAQ annual report. And just as a refresher, this committee also reviews the proposed CMAQ projects and the estimated emission reductions at the beginning of the process prior to addition to the MAG Transportation Improvement Program. Madam Chair, that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dean. Do any members have questions or comments?
I have some questions. Many of the projects were listed as awaiting for headquarters approval.
Yes.
What does that mean, and is that likely? What is the approval process like?
Sure. It's kind of a tiered process. And so the first step is for MAG to upload the CMAQ projects to Federal Highway Administration's CMAQ project tracking system. The next step is for ADOT to review and approve the projects. Then it goes to the Arizona FHWA Arizona Division Office for their review and approval. And that's where we're currently at with their approval. And the annual report that we provided to the committee indicates that it's awaiting headquarters approval, which is FHWA headquarters.
Okay.
Yes, that's the next step.
Okay. So these projects are moving forward, and it's not like they're going to be stopped if they're not approved. Disapproval is not possible, or
The projects are already completed or under
Okay.
construction. Yes.
perfect.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Dean.
You're welcome.
All right, we're on to item number 5. I think that's why we're all here today. EPA announcement on biggest deregulatory action in U.S. history. This item is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Matt Poppin from MAC.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee. So on March 12th, EPA did roll out a very extensive, unprecedented announcement that they will be looking at 31 actions, and most of these actions are deregulatory in nature in order to advance a lot of President Trump's executive orders. If you look at the fact sheet associated with this announcement, EPA has chosen to sort of organize these actions that they'll be taking into 3 main categories. So the first category, well, here's all 3 of them. It's called Unleashing American Energy. And so these are regulations associated with the production of energy domestically, lowering the cost of living for American families, and then advancing cooperative federalism, which kind of deals with how EPA approves items that are submitted by states and tribes to EPA for approval. I want to note that if you want to take a look, I've included it here. You can view Administrator Zeldin's announcement on these actions. It's about a 3-minute video, a very short summary. It doesn't go into depth, but if you'd like to review that, I put it here in the slide for you to click on and view when you have a chance. So what I wanted to do today was highlight about 5 or 6 of the actions that I think have the most direct impact for us in terms of air quality, and how those might play out in our region. So one of the first actions that are listed is EPA is going to be reconsidering a slew of motor vehicle emission standards that were passed under the Biden administration. So these are currently in law. They're currently still in effect, but EPA has committed to looking at them. We don't have a timeline yet on how long that will take, and we don't really know the process of it, but we do know what these regulations cover. So really what these were new emission standards starting with model year 2027. There was one rule that focused on light and medium duty vehicle standards. And then there was actually there were 2 rules associated with that one. And then there was a third rule that really was greenhouse gas focused for heavy duty vehicles, but it also had some criteria pollutant benefits as well for particulate matter and nitrogen oxides. So probably the main impact that reconsideration of these measures, should that occur, and should these measures be reevaluated, is when we try and do emission estimates for years in 2027 and beyond, right? So currently we're using EPA's MOVES 5 mobile emissions model, and that model takes into account the benefits of these regulations. So when we want to find out what we think emissions in 2030 will be from our light duty fleet or our medium duty fleet or our heavy duty fleet, we turn to the EPA MOVES model for that. And currently they're assuming these regulations will have been in place. If these regulations are amended, or if they go away in entirety, then EPA will have to obviously change their model. And so what we're expecting, depending on the outcome of the actions by EPA, we'll get a new model for estimating emissions. But that's really all we have at this time. And I will say with all of these announcements, we're in the very early stages. So I don't have a lot of details to share with you. But I did kind of want to put a few actions on your radar as we're moving forward. Another big one that I'm sure a lot of folks are aware of is EPA has committed to reconsideration of particulate matter standards. So back in February of 2024, EPA finalized new particulate matter standards. Well, for the most part, they kept in place the existing one, but they did lower the annual PM 2.5 standard from a level of 12 to 9. And that is the one that they are most likely going to revisit again and see if they want to change the level of that standard. Additionally, EPA has also indicated, along with revisiting the level of the standard, that they will be releasing guidance to increase flexibility on these standards implementation, reforms to new source review. That's how major sources would be impacted. Major stationary sources would be impacted by these regulations, and also some specific direction on how to, as if you're a stationary source with a permit, how you might meet the current standards. So again, the current standard remains in effect. We don't have a schedule that I'm aware of for how they will revisit these standards, but we do know their intent is to revisit them. This, from my perspective, this is probably more of a longer term process, but I don't know about that. I'm not going to say that for certain, but I would expect this might take longer than some of the other actions. But we'll monitor and keep you updated as we know more. Another big action was reconsideration of EPA's Good Neighbor Plan. And this one was already tied up in court already. And there was a stay basically on all of the actions by various district courts on EPA's approvals or disapprovals of existing plans. These are plans that show how, for example, how the emissions we generate in Arizona would impact our neighboring states. So there's been a lot of legal action associated with this. So EPA, what they have said in their current fact sheet is they're committed to working with states on working on states who have submitted good neighbor SIPs that were not approved. So I think they're going to revisit the ones that EPA has currently have disapproval action on and take a look at those again and see if maybe they can approve them. But again, a lot of this is tied up in legal action, so we're going to wait and see what happens. One of the things that's really interesting, and this might be something that they could do a little more quickly, is there is a large backlog of plans that have been submitted to EPA across not just Region 9, which is the region we're in, but across the country. These are our state implementation plans that deal with how we're going to meet the standards. There's a lot of them that haven't been acted upon by EPA. So one of their stated goal is to clear that backlog as quickly as possible. And this kind of ties into that overarching theme of cooperative federalism. So what EPA is signaling at this time is they're more open to considering states' evidence and states' rationale for the plans they are submitting. And so this could lead to quicker approvals, and also it could lead to quicker disapprovals of plans as well, as opposed to having these plans just sit up there and no action being taken on them. And again, they've really committed to work cooperatively with states and tribes to resolve SIPs that have not been addressed. They also touch on in this, in their fact sheet, again, this is just a one-page fact sheet that they have for each of these actions. They also touch on the fact that some of the reasons some of these plans have been held up is because EPA has been, they haven't really acted on emissions that are outside the control of states. So this could be international emissions or interstate emissions. So EPA is committed to looking at those as well as part of addressing this backlog. And then another important action is EPA is going to reconsider rulemaking for exceptional events. And the main thing they have indicated right now is that they're going to prioritize the allowance of prescribed fires. The current exceptional event process still looks at prescribed fire as sort of a man-made issue and not a natural issue. So this would allow them to approve prescribed fires as exceptional events. I think there is also a goal to make just the exceptional event process easier. We have multiple wildfires that we would like EPA to consider as exceptional events. So we're hopeful that this process might make that process much quicker and more likely for EPA to approve those days that we think are impacted by wildfires or dust storms that we used to do in the past as well. So those were really the items I wanted to highlight. If there's any questions on this process, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Thank you, Matt. Do any members have questions or comments?
I have some questions. I know this is all pending and tentative, but does MAG have an opinion on what the EPA means by reconsider and what might happen moving forward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a specific rule you're talking about in terms of reconsider?
I think many of them were reconsider and how those changes are going to unfold. Like the Clean Air Act is an act of Congress and not under the control of the executive branch. And so if these changes are negatively impacting air quality, is MAG or Congress going to push back on these?
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your clarification. So for these actions, EPA has the role to administer the Clean Air Act. That's their function under law. So these are all rules and regulations that they have previously issued. So they're just going back and taking a look at them again. It could be that there are legal challenges to whatever reconsiderations they finalize with. And so without really knowing the details of them, it's hard for us to comment on them at this time. But we do think they will take a look at them. And once they do and they come out with more specific actions related to each of these, more specific tangible things, we'll have a better idea. But at this time, they've just kind of committed to looking at all of these things. I think it is generally within their scope as the administration of the Clean Air Act. But again, we'll see what the actual changes are, and we'll get an idea once they start rolling out some of these ideas to be able to answer that a little bit more specifically. Just don't have the information now to be able to answer it.
It makes sense, yeah. And specifically for the Good Neighbor plans, is the end of those likely, or and then would there be a replacement to those? Like, how are those emissions going to be represented?
That's a very complex question. So there's several routes they could take. They could approve the plans that have been submitted to them. They could, I know, but there's also legal challenges going on not just, and some of those legal challenges are procedural in nature, and some of them are based on the merits of the actions that EPA took. So we'll have to kind of see how that plays out as well. If they were to pull the current Good Neighbor rule, I think you would probably default to some of the older clean air rules that are in place that still address interstate transport. But honestly, probably a lawyer would be better suited to answer that question. It's hard to know because this rule is very complex. There's 23 states involved currently. Each one has a different plan, a different way that they chose to address this requirement. Sometimes they have conflicting arguments in court. So it's going to be really difficult to see. But in general, I would expect the current system probably will not stay in place. But again, we'll have to see what they choose to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I know this is all still in flux and wildly tentative. If programs slow or stop related to clean air, how are we as a region going to respond? I mean, clean air is important, and we don't want residents to breathe in unhealthy air. So what is the potential for regression or slide back, and what are we going to do in response to that?
Yeah, so we certainly still will fulfill our duties as the lead planning agency. We still have the Clean Air Act requirements. For example, you'll hear about in our next slide what we're going to do to address moderate area requirements. So we'll continue to do that. Again, a lot of these are the rules, right? So rules and regulations have changed a lot over time. A lot have been withdrawn. Both administrations have reconsidered national ambient air quality standards. Since I've been working here, the Obama administration did with ozone. So it's not uncommon for reconsideration of those national standards. So certainly the regulations are still in place right now. And so we're working with EPA to figure out the best ways to move our region forward. And we'll continue to fulfill our duties in response as a planning agency, right? MAG is the planning agency. So we'll still work to put together a plan that meets the Clean Air Act requirements that we're aware of.
Thank you. Yeah.
You bet.
Thank you. Any other questions from members?
Hello, this is Ryan Templeton from SRP. Matt, thank you so much for giving us some information on the deregulatory announcement that was made. I was wondering if you could, and sorry if I'm preempting something that you're going to get to later on, but I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of insight on if EPA were to roll back some of the medium, light duty, and heavy duty standards that were put in with the Biden administration, how that might impact some of our SIP planning efforts that are already underway.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, and members of the committee. So with that one in particular, it doesn't have a huge impact on our current state implementation plans because of those standards will come into effect after our attainment date, right? So currently our attainment date for moderate area for ozone is 2023 for the moderate plan. If we were to be reclassified even to serious, the attainment date would be 2026. So those regulations wouldn't impact anything that we're currently putting together for ozone. I would say the one impact that probably currently exists is when we do transportation conformity analyses, we examine out years, usually 2030, 2040, 2050. And so if we were to switch to the latest MOVES model, which we're not required to at this time, we're still using an older MOVES model, that's where you'd see some of the differences. And that would relate to the budgets that we currently have in place in our plans. But in terms of our general overall air quality planning, at this time, there wouldn't be much impact to our air quality planning. If we were ever to try and do a maintenance plan for a particular standard for PM10 or ozone, I think then it would come into play as we, again, project emissions out into the future. But because we don't really have any future emissions that we have to project out to beyond 2026 at this point, there's not an immediate impact to our air quality plans at this point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? You're up next again. Some of this might be addressed because I did some questions, but I think our next item is update on plan to address moderate area requirements for the 2015 ozone standard. This item is on the agenda for information discussion and will be presented by Matt Poppin.
Yes, thank you again, Madam Chair and members of the advisory committee. So first of all, I want to talk about a meeting that MAG was able to participate in, which was really very unprecedented, to be able to speak directly with Senator Kelly and EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Was a great opportunity to highlight the issues that Arizona is facing, particularly with ozone, and that's what this meeting focused on. The chair of our regional council, from Mayor of Chandler, Mayor Hartke, did a great job in kind of opening up our session. So we were in one session that included Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, Maricopa County, and MAG. And as we've reported before, we were really able to share the same concerns that we shared with the prior administration as it relates to ozone, particularly, and I'll highlight them a little bit later in this presentation. We were able to share our concerns with the impact of international emissions on our ozone and our ability to not be able to control those, and also on our ability to not be able to exclude ozone exceedances impacted by wildfires. So I can just state that when we stated those concerns, Administrator Zeldin and Senator Kelly were very supportive of our concerns and indicated that they would be open to revising the current EPA guidance on how to deal with emissions from international sources, and they're very open to getting those wildfire events approved quickly, which will allow us to get an approvable plan up to EPA. So it was just a really great opportunity to meet and to share those concerns. There's going to be some follow-up meetings where EPA can give us a little bit more details on how they're able to act. I think how Administrator Zeldin stated it, they want to be able to tell us what they can do kind of short term, what things they can act on quickly, and maybe what things might take a little bit longer. But in general, on the basis of this meeting, we're kind of headed in a new direction with our moderate area plan, which is what I want to talk about today. So we were due to bring a plan before you today for your recommendation up to our policy committees that addressed what we were calling outstanding moderate area requirements. That plan was based on the assumption that we were going to be reclassified to serious. Based on this meeting that we had with Administrator Zeldin, we no longer think that's going to occur. It still possibly could occur, but we're under the impression that we are not going to be reclassified to serious. So because of that, we had to pull that plan back, and we have to add in some additional requirements so that we have a complete moderate area plan that we can submit to EPA, and I'll be going over those today. So our current updated approach is we're going to submit a plan to EPA that will allow the region to remain at a moderate non-attainment area status. That plan will have two major new components in it that we haven't discussed, that haven't been brought before this committee and will be brought before this committee in the next few months. It will account for the impact of international emissions in our non-attainment area. That's known as a Clean Air Act 179B demonstration. And we will be excluding ozone exceedances that are impacted by wildfires. We have met with Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, with Maricopa County Air Quality Department, Pinal County Air Quality Control District to come up with a list of those ozone exceedance days that all of the agencies agreed upon are impacted by wildfires. And so we're going to move forward with that list. We are particularly focused on the events in 2021 through 2023 because those are the events that impact our ability to attain the standard. So a little bit more about where we are in this process again. So you've seen this timeline before, and I just want to highlight again that we are under a really big time crunch. You can see that because EPA does not have a moderate area plan up there that they can act on, offset sanctions, the 2-to-1 offset sanctions on major industrial sources, Title V sources, are due to take place May 17th, 2025. Because of these changes, we have to make to, well, let me keep going. So first, just as a reminder, the attainment date for a moderate area was August 3rd, 2024. We know that the current air quality data indicates we failed to meet it by that date. But again, and we're at a current level of 80, which is 10 parts per billion over the standard of 70. However, that doesn't account for removal of wildfires and removal of international emissions. So how do we turn off these sanctions? So as we've stated before, the way to turn off these sanctions is to submit a complete moderate area plan up to EPA. And once EPA finds that plan complete, those sanctions will be terminated. Approval of that plan will also be necessary for EPA to keep us at moderate ultimately. So, but because we have to add in these new sections, it's likely we will not get a plan up to EPA before that May 17th, 2025 deadline. So it could be, this is one of the things we've asked EPA, how they're going to deal with sanctions. So we don't know exactly how the administrator will, but if they just kind of currently follow the standard process, those 2-to-1 offset sanctions could be in place while we work on getting a plan up to them. So we're going to work as fast as we can, as quickly as possible, but the sections we're adding in are significant. They do take advanced photochemical modeling. We've hired an outside consultant to help with the 179B demonstration. So right now we're anticipating we'll have a plan ready this fall, probably go before the policy committees in October. So we can get it up there before the highway funding sanctions. If we can do it quicker than that, we will. But I can tell you we will not have a plan ready by May 17th that we would feel comfortable with. We don't want to put a paper plan up there that has no backing. And so we want to maintain our integrity as an agency and make sure that what we provide is scientifically defensible and ultimately defensible because these plans are likely going to be subject to future lawsuits. So that's why it's important we do a good job in putting these plans together. So again, what are the elements that we're going to have to include in an updated moderate area plan? So we have reasonably available control technology. The good news about that is largely done. Maricopa County, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and Pinal County are addressing this separately, and that is largely done. So the plan just references those efforts. Basic vehicle inspection and maintenance program. That's the program to check the emissions on your vehicles. That's in place. Our area meets that, and we've done a performance test to show that we meet EPA standards. So that's complete. We have great non-attainment area new source review rules in place on how to permit sources. So no issues there as well, or no immediate issues that would cause the plan not to be approved for that section. So here's a new item that's currently not in the moderate area plan. So we have to include a reasonably available control measure demonstration. We had talked about this earlier before, several years ago, actually, when we had hired Ramble to look at a comprehensive list of measures. So really, this basically says we've done all that we can as a region to reduce ozone in a meaningful way, and that anything we would do further would have minimal impact. So really, what we're going to be talking about in this demonstration is the story that we've shared with you several times and that we've shared with our policy committees, with that disconnect between the reduction in local emissions has not resulted in reduced ozone concentrations. So even though we have reduced considerably our man-made emissions of nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds in the last, for several decades, since 2017, those reductions have not resulted in reduced ozone. And in fact, the opposite has occurred. We have increased ozone. So that's going to be the main argument for why additional controls beyond what we already have would not be effective in helping us reach attainment any faster. And we're also going to explain that the controls we have in place are stricter than almost any other area in the Intermountain West. Maricopa County has done a great job in showing how our permitting thresholds are stricter than Salt Lake, Las Vegas, Denver. We have 93 existing ozone control measures. So that's going to be largely what that demonstration will involve. But we do have to make that demonstration. So that's going to take a little bit of time. And we need help from our partners at the regulatory agencies as well to describe their process in choosing to implement control measures or not. We've talked about this before, a demonstration of reasonable further progress. Again, this is the 15% VOC argument. So we'll have to modify this one a little bit because that one said we would address it further in a serious area plan submittal. So we're going to have to take some time to work on modifying that demonstration as well. Another new element, ozone source apportionment modeling. So this is our modeling team here at MAG is doing a great job with this and shifting priorities. Before we were working with a base year of 2017 and trying to project forward to 2026 in anticipation of a serious area plan. Now we're just focused on modeling 2023 as it exists. And so what that modeling will do is it will tell us, how much of our ozone are from vehicles, how much of it is from interstate transport, how much of it is from international transport. So we're preparing that modeling protocol, and we're going to do the source apportionment modeling for 2023. As I mentioned earlier, we've hired Ramble Americas to prepare a retrospective 179B demonstration. This again is a demonstration saying that we would have attained the standard in 2023, but for international emissions. Ramble has done this demonstration for Utah, and most recently, also they've done it for border areas like Imperial County and El Paso. So they have a ton of experience putting these together. And we're also hopeful that some of the roadblocks from us that prevented us from doing this in the past are being removed now with our conversation with Administrator Zeldin. And they're going to remove some of those non-Clean Air Act roadblocks that were in the guidance to allow us to submit this demonstration. And then lastly, we're going to put together documentations for excluding wildfire exceedance days. The plan already includes contingency measures that Maricopa County has already acted upon. These are new controls on architectural coatings and composting. So this plan does include contingency measures already, and we will continue to have those move forward. So that's a lot, but you can see why we're not going to be able to get a plan ready before May. Still has to go out to public comment again, even though we finished the last public comment period, has to go out for a 30-day public comment period again. So that's why we're targeting fall for this new plan. So next steps. Again, we've contracted with Ramble, so we're already in the process of doing that. They're on board. We're in the middle of that work. We're also going to utilize our on-call consultants for help with documenting wildfire exceedances. Sonoma Tech has done a great job of this, so we're going to utilize them for some help as well to help speed this along. And then we're going to prepare and submit a complete moderate plan as quickly as possible, likely fall 2025. So that completes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Thank you. Once again, Matt. Any comments or questions from the members?
This is Mike Denby from APS. Fantastic, Matt. Thank you very much. Very informative, as always. The wildfire question. Is this different than the way we've addressed wildfires in the past? I'm curious. We've had exceptional events based on wildfires before, or had wildfires pulled out as exceptional events. Is this the same thing, just going deeper, or is this like anything that has to do with a wildfire is instantly going to be culled from the data? Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So we're still working with EPA to know exactly the level of documentation and how to work through the process. There's two pathways for getting days that we've identified. Again, I want to stress that those days that have been identified have been agreed upon by us, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and the county agencies. And in fact, we've taken the days that we think have the highest probability and sort of the middle level probability of approval by EPA, and we've kind of left out the ones with low probability, even though we think though they were impacted, we've decided not to address those. But really the issue is we have identified those days in the past, and EPA has been unwilling to meet us on those, no matter the level of documentation we've provided. And so we are going to bolster the documentation a little bit more. For example, we had identified 33 days in 2015 through 2019, and EPA was only willing to say yes to 3 of those. 2 of those they have already concurred on as exceptional events. So there was only 1 more day they were willing to say yes to. We're going to resubmit those days as part of the plan. And we think they're going to have a much more reasonable viewpoint of the technical information this time around. But there are 2 pathways. We're going to address it as part of the plan. That's called an atypical demonstration. That allows us to remove it for modeling purposes. And then the second part is whether or not we need to do a full-blown exceptional event demonstration that EPA would then concur upon. So that's what we need guidance on from EPA on with. We know for sure we're going to do the atypical pathway. So we'll have an appendix to our plan saying why these dates in 2021 through 2023 should be excluded. Whether or not we have to prepare exceptional event documentation for that, that EPA would then concur on, separate from plan approval, is not known yet. If so, we should be ready to do that. That's why we're kind of putting together a lot of information in the plan so that if we have to do that second step, we should be ready to go. So I know that's pretty technical, but I hope that provides some additional context.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Great context. The question I have, and maybe I'm going down a slippery slope, is if we have this door sort of wide open for doing a lot of this stuff, are we then looking at attainment for marginal or moderate, and then taking ourselves out of the queue of non-attainment? Like, is this how far does this go if we get international emissions and wildfires taken off the table? Does that change our non-attainment status potentially in the future, or are we still just going to be stuck in moderate trying to figure this out?
So,
sorry.
Yeah, thanks again, Mike. So our current understanding is that the way the Clean Air Act is written for 179B little b is that if EPA approves that demonstration that you would have attained but for international emissions, the only relief that provides is it locks you in at your current designation. So all of the other requirements of reasonable further progress and RACT and a new source review and a vehicle inspection and maintenance program, all of those other things would stay in place. We just would no longer be subject to additional classification to serious or to severe. We would just stay at moderate. Now, there has been some discussion about whether EPA has authority to kind of move you backward on the severity ladder. So they could reclassify you to marginal, say, if additional things were to happen. That would be novel, but that is something that people have suggested. And so, again, that's something that's probably a legal question that lawyers would understand. But currently, from my understanding at least, and I will put a ceiling on my understanding in that I am not a lawyer, but everything we have seen is that people submit these demonstrations to remain at the classification that they are at. That's what's happened in Imperial County that has had this approved, as well as El Paso. Once those actions were approved by EPA, they remained at their current status. They were not reclassified, or they were not moved from non-attainment to attainment. Really, the Clean Air Act mechanism for getting out of attainment is a maintenance plan and a redesignation request, which is another formal SIP submittal. That's traditionally what you would have to do, and normally you don't do that unless your air quality data is showing attainment, meaning that you can prove at the monitors you met it. Now, it is sort of an interesting idea. If you've proven that international, can you then use that international demonstration to help move you to maintenance? I don't know. Maybe that's a possibility. I don't think that's been done, but that's certainly something to look at, to think about, and to have legal staff consider moving forward.
As always, thank you, Matt.
Any other questions or comments?
The 2-to-1 offset sanction, is that just for new major sources?
It's for new and existing.
New and existing, okay.
Yeah. So a new source would still be 100 tons. But an existing source, if they want to expand, it's 40 tons, I believe, is the trigger for what would trigger that major expansion or a new location. So yeah, if a new source moved in and they were a 100-ton source, they'd have to find 200 tons in order to get a permit.
Do you have an idea what the impact will be by the sanction between May and the fall when there's a plan?
Not specifically. Again, we would want to work with our partners at Maricopa County and ADEQ if they have any ideas about permitting things that are coming through on major sources. Yeah. So it's something and again, we don't know. It's unclear how much latitude the administrator has in terms of if he enforces those sanctions or not. So that question is being looked at as well, if he chooses to enforce those sanctions or not. But currently, I just put the date up there. That's the current date that you would expect. That would be the earliest that it would happen. But if the administrator chooses to do something different, he might have latitude to do that. But I don't want to speculate on what he might choose to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
And maybe a long-term is in that conversation, did they look at the standard itself and maybe rolling back, or that wasn't unclear as well?
Yeah. In that conversation, there was no discussion about the current standard. And I think, EPA had already started a review of the current standard. The Biden administration had already started that process. And it wasn't specifically mentioned in the deregulatory actions either. So I don't know where EPA is at with the current standard. Yeah.
Any other bewilderment out there? Well, thank you very much for having those meetings and having that discussion, because wildfires and international has just literally hung over us, right? And we haven't figured out a beneficial way of trying to show attainment with those two. So we appreciate the effort. Anything else? Sorry, anybody else had any? Thank you. All right. Item number 7, request for future agenda items. An opportunity will be provided for the committee members to request topics or issues of interest they would like to have considered for discussion at a future meeting. Are there any requests from the membership for an item on a future agenda? I'm sure these things will be on future agendas every time as we move along. But if you also think of something that you would like to have, you can always reach out to MAG staff as well to put that on. So if you can't think of anything right this moment. Okay, the next meeting of the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee will be on Thursday, April 24th, 2025 at 1:30 p.m. Business is now concluded. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Robert Vandenonker, City of Buckeye, motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Christina Hoppus will second that.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is now adjourned. Appreciate your time.